Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about the most famous and the most language that we use in our daily life as developer, and that is Git. So the purpose of this video is to demonstrate how can we automate some of the tasks that we use in Git using Git aliases, and how can we resolve some of the issues that we face daily, such as conflicts, etc. So I will start by creating a new repository. I will call this demo and I will create it. I will clone it and I will go inside that repository. Okay, so I will start by creating a simple file. So I will say touch file.txt. And now I'm going to demonstrate the first misconception that many people have in Git, which is if you run git commit-am, that the A option is equivalent to running git add. So people say, okay, instead of running git add git commit, you can just say git commit-am, and that will add and commit at the same time. And this conception is wrong. And this is what I will show you right now. So if I hit enter, you will see what's sitting in the console that nothing added to commit, but untracked files present. Why? Because the A option in the git commit only adds the tracked files. And in order to make a file tracked, you need to run git add. So this is something that you usually do only once. So once the file is tracked according to Git, then if you made changes to that file in the future and you run git commit-am, it's going to work just fine. But if you just recently created the file, it's untracked by default. And the only way to make it tracked is by running the git add. So if I said git add file.txt, and let me run the git status, right now it's tracked, and I run the git commit-am first commit, it's going to work just fine, as we can see here. So we did two things, right? We created the file and then we added it to Git. How can we automate this process? And this is where we are going to create our first alias, which is the git touch. The git touch is going to create the file and add it to Git automatically. How can we create aliases? There are many ways to do that, but I will show you an easy and consistent way that will work in every scenario without any syntax or issues. Um, so in order to do that, you need to go to the git config file that is in the home directory. So make sure this is the directory and the file name is git.getconfig. And you will get your aliases under the aliases option. And if you don't have it, just add it like this. Okay. So now I'll create my touch alias. And inside the alias, I will create a bash function. And how to create that bash function? You would put that under double quotes, explanation mark, f, and then your function, and then f, and then end it with a double quotes. And this is the syntax that we're going to use for all the aliases in this video. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a new file, right? And then add it to Git. Now you might be wondering, what is $1? Now, if you are not familiar with Bash, this is expected. The $1 is the first argument after your command. So if I said git touch and then the file name, that file name would be $1. But if I had a second argument after the file name, that would be $2. And you will have $3, $4 if you had 4 arguments, etc. We have created our argument. Let's go ahead and close it, save it and close it. And now let's see it in action. So I will say git touch file2.txt. Enter. And now if I run git status, you will see that the file is automatically tracked. as you can see here in green. And I can say get commit dash am second commit, and this will work like a charm. Okay, now this is where I'm going to create the second alias, which will run the get commit dash am. Now you might be wondering why I'm creating an alias just to add the a option. I will get to that shortly, but let's create the second alias for now, which is the get commit a. That's what I'm going to call it. And the step is always the same. So I'll go inside. I'll call it commit a equals, and just to be consistent, I will make them on the same like indentation. And this is going to this will basically run the get commit dash am and the $1 like this. Now, since we have a now since it's a string, it had to be inside double quotes. But since we have a double quotes inside a double quotes, we need to escape it like that. Okay, good. Now let's save it and let's see it in action. So now let's modify the file. So I had the file.txt, right? Let's add hello and let's append it to the file.txt. And remember, the file.txt is already tracked, so I can say get commit a third commit, and it's going to work like a charm. It will detect the changes and it will add it. Okay, so we have one syntax error. Let's go ahead and fix it quickly. In the file unexpected. Okay, let's go and fix that. Okay, let's run this, and here we go. Now the commit was actually changed, and if I run like git log, you can see that the commit is actually there. And now what are we going to do? Now sometimes we have situations where we added a file, but then we regret that we added the file, but we want to unadd it from Git. Like for example, you created a file to add some notes, and then you're like, oh, I don't want that to be pushed to GitHub. So let's see that in action. So in order to do that, in order to run the git unadd, which is the third alias, let's actually create it right now. So I will go to the git config file and I will call it unadd. And the command is git rm, which stands for remove dash dash cached, and again $1, which refers to the argument. And you might be wondering, what is the difference between remove and get remove? And what is the dash dash cached option? So the difference between removed and get removed is if you had a file that is tracked by Git and you run the remove command and you run git status, Git will not realize that you actually remove the file. Now, if you commit it and push, it will be recognized. But if you run git status after you removed it using the normal remove command, Git will not see it. So I highly recommend that if you want to remove any file that's already tracked by Git, to use the git remove command. Now the dash dash cache command ensures that the file is not removed from your folder. It's only going to be untracked by Git, but it's not going to actually remove the file. But if you want the file to be actually removed, then you will remove this dash dash cached option. That being said, I think we're good. I will save and I will demonstrate that. So git touch file3.txt. If I run git status, it's there. I want to unadd it, and actually, if I run ls, the file3 is there. Now let me run git unadd file3.txt, and it says it was removed. But if you run ls, it's actually still there, and if you run git status, it's now untracked again. Okay, so now we have uh, we've added 3 aliases. Now let's talk about push. Let's say that I'm ready. Actually, let me add this file again, and let me commit added file3.txt, and let me push. Now, since this is the first time we created, since this is master and this is our first command, the get push will work just fine. And if I refresh, you will see all my changes are there. Everything is good. But sometimes you might have a problem. Actually, it's not a huge problem, but it will waste like 10 seconds of your everyday life. What is that problem? Let's switch to a different branch. For that, I will run git switch -c, and I will call it feature 1. Now, the switch is like checkout, but the reason I use switch because it's a newer command and it's easier to comprehend, right? So I switched to a different branch and I created using the -c option. And I will create a fourth file. So I will say get touch file 4.txt. And now I will commit the file. And now I'm going to show you what happens if you run git push. It will ask you to set the upstream first before you run the git push, because right now there is no branch called feature 1 in here. And there are 2 ways to set the upstream. You can run this long command, or you can pass the -u option to your git. And so the way to do it is by running git push -u origin and specify the branch name. Now we can specify the branch name, but instead of doing that, I'm going to say head. Now you might be wondering, so head is usually the current commit or etc. But if you pass head, it will understand that you are pushing using the same branch. Now why I'm saying head? Actually, let me run this first, and I was going to work like a charm. And even if you run the push -u command every time, Git is not going to complain. But you just need to add it for the first time if you want to, if the remote repository, the remote branch is not existent yet in GitHub. Now the reason I want to say head because I want to make this word consistent instead of it being different each time. And now you see what I'm going with this. I want to create a new alias for pushing GitHub, which is the pushu. That's what I'm going to call it, so that we use the pushu instead of push every time and avoid this issue where we need to set the upstream. So let's go ahead and create our alias. Okay, and here we go. Okay, but again, why an alias for just passing the u command, and why an alias just for the commit command? Because of the next alias that I want to use, which is, in many cases, you don't want to just commit and leave the commits on your local machine, right? In many cases, you want to run git add, git commit, and git push at the same time. And you do this every single time. You add a feature, you fix a bug, you run the same 3 commands at the same time. Why don't we have an alias that does all of that automatically so we don't need to worry about that? Um, or that we don't waste our time in writing the same commands every time. For this, I will go ahead and create a new alias, and I will call it deploy. That's what I'm going to call it. And it's going to do things. It will run the commit here, and it's going to run the git push command. And something that is very important, which is that, remember that this refers to the commit message, right? So we need to make sure that it's under double quotes. So for that, we have to add the double quotes, and we need to make sure that it's escaped since the double quotes are inside double quotes. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's create a different feature branch, and let's test our deploy alias. So I just want to see how our feature looks like. So it has the 4 files. Okay, good. Now I'm going to create a new branch out of feature 1. I will call it feature 2 for now. And I will add file 5. And now I will run git deploy added file 5.txt. And now watch the magic. Boom. See what happened? Let me refresh the page. What did it do? It added, it committed, and it pushed all at the same time. Now you might be wondering, why not run git add dot and git commit? Or some people do git add dash a. The reason being is that sometimes you don't want to add all the files that you have in your machine. Sometimes if you are using an IDE, it generates some automatic files that you don't want to push to your GitHub. So a lot of sometimes this happens a lot, where you add unwanted files and then you create another commit to remove them from GitHub. This is very common. So by running the git commit a, and by you ensure that you're only committing and pushing the files that you marked as tracked. So that's the difference between running git commit-am and running git add dot. Okay, that being said, let's talk about the next scenario. What is the next scenario? Sometimes we have files that we modify that we don't want git to commit. What do we mean by that? Example, security stuff, like you have an application.properties file, you have a client ID and client secret that you override locally, but you don't want that to be pushed when you create the PR, right? This is a very common example. So, but at the same time, you don't want the file to be removed. And that is the difference between the unadd and between what I'm going to show you. What do I mean by that? So right now, if I run alias, we have five files, right? If I run git unadd file 5.txt and you run git status, it's going to actually delete the file from Git. However, this is not what we want right now. What we want is, we want the file to stay the same, but if you made any changes to it, we want to tell Git, hey, ignore any changes that I'm making to that file. So how can we do that? First, let me add the file5.txt again, and now everything is returned to normal. In order to do that, there is a command called update index, and you pass something known as skip work tree option. So let me create the alias, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I will call it gitignore. Again, this is not the same as unadd. Unadd actually deletes the file from Git, but this will keep the file. But if you made any changes to it, it's not going to be tracked by Git. So the command is git update dash index dash skip dash work tree, and you specify the file. And let's see how that looks like. Okay, let me ignore. Actually, before I ignore, let me show you what I mean. Let me override the file 5. Let me say echo hello, and let me append that to the file 5.txt, right? If I run git status, you will see that Git understood that I modified the file and it's ready to be committed and pushed. So let me just run git restore. So git restore removes all the changes that I've made to that file. And now we are back to normal, right? Now if I run gitignore file5.txt, and let me now do the same thing. Let me say git, sorry, let me run the same command now, and git status. And what do you see? Git doesn't even notice that I made any changes to that file. And this is useful, especially when you have like environment a file, or if you have security files that you don't want them to be pushed when you make these changes. So this is how you ignore. So how can you unignore? For that, let's go back again and create our next alias. And I will call this unignore. And I just love to be like consistent. And it's very similar. The only difference is you say no skip work tree. And that's it. It's as simple as that. That being said, let's go ahead and save it. And let's unignore file.txt. And now, if I said, if I appended something again to the same file, now it's recognized again. And I can commit it and I can push it. So let's do the deploy command because it's so cool. And here we go. And that's how we do it. Okay. Now let's talk about the next scenario, which is conflicts. Something that's very known. How can we resolve the conflicts in a very easy manner? Now I'll create the conflicts. Now the most famous conflicts is when you merge something, right? When you merge something to master, for example. And this is what I will show you. And I will show you how can I create an alias to resolve these conflicts very easily. So actually, let me go ahead and go to master, right? And master right now has three files, right? And let me create a new file. I will call it get touch hello.txt, and I will create a branch out of master. I will call it feature. And now feature has this file, and now the master branch has this file, right? But what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify the file in the master branch. So I will say echo, and let me say red, and add it to the hello.txt. I'll call this red commit. So right now, if I run get cat hello.txt, this is red, right? Now let me move to the feature branch. And if I run the same command, it doesn't have anything, right? Oh. Okay, I made a small mistake. So let me go to master. I was supposed to commit the file before I create the feature branch. So let me delete the branch, and let's do this again. So I will actually going to actually right now it's already committed, right? So I can create that branch again, and now I will change the color from red to green, and I will go ahead and deploy that. And now let me go back to the feature branch, and if I run hello.txt, it's red, but in the master branch it's green. Now let me go ahead and change the color to blue, for example. Okay. Now I'm going to merge this change to master and see what's going to happen. And now we have the conflict. Now, why did we have this conflict? The reason we have this conflict is because we did not pull the latest changes from master. So when we created the feature branch out of the master branch, the text that was in the hello file was read, right? And now, after we pulled from master, master made some changes to the file, and the feature branch did not pull from master. Instead, it made changes to the same file, and that's why the conflict happened. Now, before we even try to resolve the conflict, if you don't want to go over if you don't want to go over the merge conflict at all, you can always go ahead and run the get merge dash dash abort, and that will abort the merge completely, and then you can remake your changes and then try to merge it again. So this is an option. But now let me remerge again. Now we have this. Now let's ask the first question, which is, how can we know where the conflict is? Now there are so many ways to do it, but I think the easiest way is running git diff, which will show you the differences. So the head is your current branch, which is master, and here you have the color green, but the feature branch have the blue. And if you are confused by these signs, like the plus plus sign, the equal sign, etc., what you can do, you can say get diff, and you can say dash dash hours. And when you say dash dash hours, it shows your changes in your current branch. And by contrast, you can say get diff dash dash theirs, and that will show the other branch changes, which is the color blue, correct? Okay. Now, how can we resolve the conflict? Now, you can manually modify the file, right? Like you can modify the file and then remove all the weird signs and then do what you want to do. This is an option. But 90% of the time, you want to either your changes or the other branch changes. You don't want your changes and the master branch changes to overlap each other. It's usually either your changes or the other branch changes. So for that, the easy way to do it is by running git restore. And if you want your changes, the current branch changes, you say dash dash hours. So that will keep the changes that are already in the master branch. If you want the changes from the other side, which is the feature branch, you would say dash dash theirs. Let's assume that, okay, what we actually want is the changes from the feature branch, which is the blue commit. I would run git restore dash dash theirs. And of course, I have to specify the file. So for example, if I said dot, I'm mentioning all the files. So let's do that for now. So here, when I say dot, I'm saying accept all the changes from the feature branch. So now I will hit enter. Now if I run cat load.txt, it's showing what? It's showing blue. It's showing their changes. Now if I run git status, I can add and then commit, etc. So let me add the file. And now I can run git commit and specify the commit message name. But in most cases, um, it's acceptable to just have the default merge message. So for that, you can just run git merge dash dash continue, and that will do it for you. So that's what I'm going to do. I will run git merge dash dash continue. I will hit enter, and this is the default message. But you will see that I opened the editor. When you run this command, you open the editor. So I will save this, and I will exit, and now the branch has been merged. Okay, so how can we do all of this using aliases? What did we do? We ran three commands. We ran the get restore, we run the git add, and we run the git merge dash dash continue. We only had one slight problem, which is that the editor opens, and I will show you how to resolve that problem. So I will go to git config. I will call this resolve. So what did we do? Git restore, and then specify the file path. So that would be the first argument. And then the second, we have another argument, which is, do we want our changes or their changes, right? So that would be the second argument. Then what did we do? We added the file, right? So here the $1 is the file. The $2 is ours or theirs, right? And then we run the git merge dash dash continue command, right? And now to skip the editor from being opened, you can say git underscore editor equals /bin/true. And that will make sure that the editor is not opened and the git merge continue will just run without any issues. So that being said, let's save this and let's test this resolve alias. Okay. Now I will go ahead and make another conflict. So right now the feature branch is merged into master branch. Now I will create a new file just for demonstration. And now I will create a branch. I'll call it feature 10 for now. And now let's do the same thing, right? Let's make bed, and let's append it to the hello2.txt. And now let's switch to feature 10, and let's append the color green. And let's go back to master. And now let's try to merge the feature 10 branch. And as you can see, now we have the conflict. And now we can run git resolve hello2.txt dash dash ours. Now we want our changes. We don't want the feature branch changes. And now it's going to do the magic. Here we go. It ran all the comments that we need. And now it was merged successfully. And now if I run cat hello.txt, you will see red, which is our changes in the master branch. So now this is how we can resolve the conflict very easily. Okay. What's next? Let's talk about creating PRs. Now, after you commit, after you push, usually what you do next is creating a pull request, right? So can you actually create pull request from the command line? The answer is yes. And since we are using GitHub for our example, and this is the one that is used by most companies, there is a CLI for GitHub. So let's search for that. And I will go to the manual. And there are a lot of great commands. There are a lot of things that you can do. But since this video is for automation, I will show you how can you create a pull request automatically after you push the feature branch, for example. So let me go to this create. You can specify the title, you can specify the body, you can specify the reviewers. There is a lot of control that you can have using this CLI. That being said, let's see an example and see how it looks like. So let's go to let's create, so okay, right now I'm in the master branch, I'm assuming. Let's create feature 3. And now let's do something very simple. Let's create a new file and let's call it hello3. Now let's commit that change. Actually, let's deploy it. And now actually let me go back to master. I should have I should have pushed the changes. Okay, now let me go back to feature 3. And now let's create the PR. So what I'm going to do, I'll run the same exact commands. I will say gh create dash dash title fixing bug. Let's say that this is the title and the body is an empty string. And you don't need to specify anything else, but you can, of course. And now we created our first pull request. And if I went to this pull request section, you will see this message. And right now the body is empty, of course. And we created this new file, which is the hello3.txt. Let me just close the PR temporarily. Of course, you can do a lot of stuff. Now you can see where I'm going with this, which is to create an alias to create a PR. So since this is something that we do after we push, now sometimes we want to create a PR and sometimes we don't want to create a PR. So how about we create an optional argument to our get deploy alias so that sometimes we can get a PR or sometimes we don't based on that optional argument. So for that, I'm going to modify the get deploy alias. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's say assume that our optional argument is called dash PR. And if that dash PR is presented, then I will create the PR automatically. So I will say if $2 equals, so it has to be a string. This is important. And since it's a string, it has to be escaped. Okay. Then ghtpr create dash dash title, and we can say what is the title. Let's assume that the title is our commit message, which is the first argument. And let's assume that the body is an empty string. So now what did we do? We added this if statement so that if we pass an optional argument, which we are going to assume as dash pr, then create a pull request, and you need to make sure that you end it with fi, like this. So now let's put that into action. So right now we are still in branch feature 3. Let me create a file. I will call it hello 4, for example. Now first I will not pass the dash pr argument, and I will just say get deploy hello folder.txt. Okay, so it says expecting fi. Okay, let's fix our syntax. Okay, I think the fi has to be after the semicolon. And now, if we went back to the feature 3, we can see that our changes were pushed 11 seconds ago, but the PR was not created. But now, if I did this, if I said get touch hello5 to txt, get deploy hello5, and then I said dash PR, let's see what's going to happen. It's going to create the PR as well. Now, if I refresh the page, it created the new file, and it also created the pull request into master. Okay, cool. So now we have done this. What's next? Next is something that I love. Is the git hooks. Now you might be asking me, what is git hooks? Now, when you hear the word hooks with git, you would assume it's the webhooks that you add here. And this is something that's very useful, especially when you interact with CI/CD tools. Like if you push something to GitHub, you want like Jenkins or any other CI tool to pick it automatically and do some actions like deploying to Artifactory or deploying to some server, etc. But this is not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is something known as Git hooks, which run automatically when you run certain operations using Git. And there are so many of them. I highly recommend that you check them. I will cover two of them. The pre-commit hook and the prepare-commit-msg hook. So for that, I will create a sample hello world project, and I will show you two useful examples on how we can use Git hooks to automate some of the processes when we commit and before we push to GitHub. So actually for that, I will go to my notes and I will use this example which creates some hello world node project and creates a sample test case. Actually, I'll just go away from here. I'll go to the home directory, and this will be very fast, so you don't need to worry about that. So it just creates a sample node project, and I will follow the exact instructions. Okay, let me install Express. And this will run a hello world on port 8080. And in order to test it, we can say node.app.js. And if I went to localhost 8080, I should be able to see this hello world. Okay, good. So I will stop it for now, and let me install Mocha and Shy, which are testing frameworks for Node.js. So what is this doing is that it's going to test the hello world in port 8080, and it has just one sample test case that will test that what's on port 8080 equals to hello world. And now if I run tests, it's going to fail. The reason why it's going to fail is very simple. It's because the server is not running. So let me run the server here. And let me open a new terminal. And let me run the tests here. And you'll see that, sorry, I have to go inside the my app. And now you'll see that it passed because the server is running and it is returning hello world when we hit port 8080. Okay, so what's the purpose of all of this? Is to demonstrate the commit hooks, right? So how can we so there are scenarios, right? Like when you push something to GitHub and you see your tests are failing, right? Why? Because we forgot to run our tests before we push to GitHub. So can we do something like running the tests on our machines before we commit to GitHub, and that if the tests have failed, then don't commit? Is that something that we can do? The answer is yes. And this is when I'm going to introduce the pre-commit hook. How can we add the pre-commit hook? Would go inside the .git folder, which doesn't exist. So let's, because this is not initialized, let me run the git init, and let me go inside the .git, and inside it there's a folder called hooks. And if you run like alias, you'll see a lot of samples. Um, but in order to create a pre-commit hook, you need to create a file called pre-commit, right? Sorry, like that. And what is it going to do? It will just run our tests in this example. I'll go ahead and save it. I will step two steps back. And now if I run git status, it will say there's a lot of untracked files. And here I want to give you a quick introduction to the fact that in many cases we don't want the node modules to be pushed to GitHub. So how can we ignore specific directories from being pushed completely? So for that, you would create a gitignore file. I know that most people know that, but let me explain that in a few seconds. So in order to do that, you would create a file called .unignore and just specify the, the folder, which is node underscore modules. And now if I run git status, you will see that it's not being even tracked. It's not even being mentioned by Git anymore. It's completely being ignored. So that's actually a very useful thing that you want to do. Now going back to the topic, let's say that I want to add all these files and then commit them. And now I will commit, and I will say created hello world project. And now you will see a small problem. What is the problem? Let's run. It committed, but it gives you this hint. It says that the pre-commit was ignored because it's not set as executable. So this is something that you need to do. When you create a hook inside the .git folder, you need to make sure that it's executable. So let's go inside. And let's make it executable. And now let's go back. And let's make a small change. Like adding the hello text file that I always add. And now git commit added hello text. And now see what's going to happen. Let's see what's going to happen. Now it's running the tests before it's being committed. And since it has failed, the file was not committed. And as a proof, if I run git log, it did not add the new commit, which is adding the hello text file. So let's make that test pass. Let's run our server. And let's go back here and let's commit our file. And now since the server is running, the test is going to pass, and therefore the file is going to be committed. So that's a very useful thing that you can use the pre-commit for. The other hook that I want to mention is the prepare commit message. And that allows you to do a lot of things, but one main thing that you can do is modify the commit message after you are using some special meaning. This is very useful, especially when you follow some standards in your company, like adding maybe fix or adding some user story number, etc. The example that I'm going to demonstrate is when you work with a pair and you want to append the co-authored by and then your pair name when you make these commits. So that's a very useful case, and you don't want to append your commit message co-authored by and then your partner every time you make that commit. So how can we do that using the prepare-commit-message? Same steps. I will go inside the get/hooks, and I will show you the sample that they have because I want to go briefly over something. So let me run cat prepare, which is that I wanted to mention that it actually has three arguments. The commit message file, which is your message, this is the one that we are going to override. The second one is the commit source. So for example, if it's a message, if it's a template, most of the time it's actually a message. And the third one is related to the SHA of your commit. And since we are modifying the message itself, we're going to modify the $sign one. So that's what I wanted to go over with briefly. That being said, let's create our prepare-commit-message prepare commit message hook. So the way that I'm going to override it is by saying /n/n, which will add two lines, co-authored by, and then name. And then you can say name at example.com. And I think you need to add a space, if I'm not mistaken. And then since I want to append and not like override, you need to add a draw angle brackets. And you can say $1. I think that's it. I hope that I didn't make any mistakes. Control S. And now it's saved. Now I have to make sure that it's executable. Let me go 2 steps back. Let me create the second hello text file as an example. And now I'm going to push it to some GitHub repository. So let me create a new repository. Yeah, let me create a new repository. Let me add to origin. And let me deploy our changes. And now, if I refreshed, you will see that the last commit shows my co-author, which is the name at example.com, as you can see here. So that's everything that I wanted to show you in this demo. I hope that you learned some stuff. And for the Git hooks that I've used, I will put them. I will create a new repository that have all the aliases in the description. Um, so that's it. I thank you very much for watching this video up to this far, and see you soon. Thank you and goodbye.